Welcome to Brewing TV. I'm your host, Michael Dawson. It's no secret the connection between homebrewing and craft brewing. We want to take you to a place today that embodies that crossroads between homebrew and craft. It was also an early outpost of good beer, occupying territory in a city known for macro brew. Come with us now to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Lakefront Brewery. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the original beer city, USA. The history of beer in this town goes back more than 150 years. From the immigrant brewers and neighborhood taverns of the 1800s to the giant macros of the 20th century, Milwaukee has been key to the development of American beer. You can add to that rich brewing heritage the industrious and innovative Lakefront Brewery. Lakefront was founded in 1987 by brothers Russ and Jim Klisch. In the early years, the Klisch brothers brewed out of this old bakery and delivered beer by hand to nearby pubs and bars.
In 1981, I graduated from college, didn't have a job, and so I asked my brother if I could move in with him. He lived right about a mile north of here in the Riverwest neighborhood of Milwaukee, and he was nice enough to let me in there. His birthday was coming up, so I asked him what he wanted for his birthday, and he said he was thinking about making beer. So I went out and I bought him a book on how to make beer, and he read it, and then he made himself a batch of beer. And the beer he made, I looked at how he was doing it, and it's like, God, this is going to taste like hell. And then he made it, and he gave me a bottle, and it wasn't the worst beer I ever had, wasn't the best either, but you think, if my brother made it that way, I figured, I could do better. And so I made a batch of beer, and he made some more beer, and we started entering our beer in contests. We started winning awards and made more home brew, and I entered more contests and won more awards. And then her friends started telling us, you guys should open up a brewery. And when you're 20-something years old, you listen to them. We put in a 55-gallon stainless steel drum system. And then so from that point on, now and then we just kind of put a piece of equipment in, another piece of equipment in, and then whatever we find we can afford to put another piece of equipment in, and until where we are today. And I built my Frankenstein operation because most of the equipment I have has been lived and died a previous life.
That first year in business, the Klisch brothers brewed 72 barrels of beer. 10 years later, they were up to 3,000 barrels and moved into this much larger building along the Milwaukee River.
Originally built as a power plant, actually generated electricity for streetcars. In 1920, they kind of shut that down. Then it became repaired streetcars here, underground division for the electric company. Then the city of Milwaukee bought it in '65 or something for their forestry department. And we bought it from the city of Milwaukee in '98 and put the brewery in. But it's a great facility. People love it. Tours are popular. People love coming down here, having a tour right next to the river. TripAdvisor.com has us rated #1 tourist attraction in Milwaukee right now, and 4th best brewery tour in the nation.
Any home brewers here today? Yeah, we got a couple. You guys understand. You stir that pot at the stove, and you smell the walls, and you smell the hops. Those aromas hit your nose. They travel from your nose directly to your brain. They distort the way you think. Yes, they give you delusions of grandeur and make you think you can open your own brewery.
This year, the brewery is expected to produce 22,000 barrels of beer and distribute to 35 states. The day we visited Lakefront, they were brewing batches of their fixed gear American Red and packaging it for the first time ever in 12-ounce six-packs.
Yeah, well, it was interesting back then, more than it is today. I did feel like, looking back, we were kind of pioneers. Because you'd have people that, consider themselves like huge beer drinkers and knew everything about beer. And after about 5 years of operation, you go and tell them you had a brewery in town and they never heard of you. In today's world, a lot of times a new beer comes out, everybody's got to try something, or the buzz is about different things. And trying to get people's interest back in those days was rather tough. And we were in the Riverwest neighborhoods, which was, in a way, it was very successful because it's kind of an artist neighborhood, and a lot of people, drank our beer there, and we had a good home base. And for the first time, a lot of those bar owners told me, I never could attract anybody from outside the neighborhood to come to drinking here. And once we had your beer on draft, the people came from outside the neighborhood.
But we try to stay active even today in the craft brewing scene. We do special beers for various bars in town. We do special aging, sometimes do barrel-aged beers, and we'll release those in the beer bars like Sugar Maple and the Palm, sometimes Comet Cafe. Depending on who wants to do it. As you can see in the brew house, we really don't have the shiniest copper out there. We don't get too picky about polishing it every day and keeping people's fingers off of it or anything. It's a very functional system. Its purpose is to make beer, not to be pretty. But it definitely has a certain character anyway. These are the original blueprints for our brew house. It was originally made in 1964 by Hoopman, which is a German company. These are all spelled out in German. This shows basically our wort kettle and lauter tun and the original control panel, which we have downstairs. The only components we really have are the two vessels and the control panel. The rest of it, you can see they had a design for malt silos, malt handling equipment, the mill, and spent grain handling. The control panel is an interesting piece of equipment. It's all in German. A really popular part of the tour when they get to go on the brew deck and they can look at all that. Not much of it is functional anymore. A few of the handles connect to valves still that actually control water flow into the brew house as it is. A lot of the switches have been replaced and actually do control pumps still. During the runoff, we have a grant that takes from the bottom of the lauter tun and it's pumping the sweet wort up to the brew kettle. It passes through a sight tube on the brew deck so that brewers can watch the clarity of the wort and the color. Our brew house is completely manual. There's no automation on it right now. And as such, the brewer that's in charge of running it has a lot of control over what's going on. It's up to them to make sure that everything's happening at the right temperature and the right time because there's no computer to back them up. Dragging hoses around, hooking up hoses, manually opening valves. The filter is really tricky. We run a diatomaceous earth filter. The filter's down to about 1 or 2 microns. And that's all manual valves too, so it takes a lot of focus to maintain the pressures through that. It's very easy to screw up the process. It takes a lot of skill.
Lakefront's original flagship beers are lagers, based on traditional European recipes. But more recently, the brewers have been turning out awesome ales like Fixed Gear, IBA, India-style Black Ale, Bridge Burner, and Organic ESB.
We've done a couple innovative things throughout the way, like our cherry beer was one of the first fruit beers ever made in the United States. And we had the gluten-free beer. We were the first to do an organic beer and be certified and brew a beer under our own label. Local acre, which is all Wisconsin ingredients. And so we had, worked with farmers to get the hops and barley growing. We have the 88 4-pack, and that's another innovation. Our brewery came up with like the first brewery to do a 4-pack of 88s, our 22-ounce bottle. But we, you also have other, things like the Fixed Gear that we're making, which you kind of sit there and say, well, we need to do an ale that is nice and hoppy, but not over the top in hops like an IPA, or it makes it very drinkable.
There's 3/4 pound of Caribbean and a 1/4 pound of Special B. That's it.
Lakefront is also collaborating with Jeremy King from Northern Brewer Milwaukee. You remember King from our King's Cool Ship episode. Jeremy is working with Yeast Labs to isolate a usable wild yeast from Wisconsin. Once accomplished, this will make Lakefront's local acre beer series 100% local.
I remember a Belgian brewer once getting upset with a California brewer that kept on telling him, asking him too many damn questions. He just looked at him and said, why don't you just find your local ingredients and learn how to brew with them? And I think that's a good model for here. We're just trying to find the local ingredients and learn how to brew with them.
Lakefront celebrates its roots in homebrewing by supporting the local Milwaukee homebrew scene, including this wort rally in 2010.
Who says he couldn't brew in a bucket? I don't.
Lakefront hosted 300 homebrewers in their facilities and gave away 50 barrels of Riverwest Steinbier wort, 5 gallons of free wort for everyone. They also worked with Northern Brewer on a line of Pro Series beer kits, craft beer recipes scaled down to a homebrew-sized batch by the brewers themselves. In the same vein of promoting small-scale brewing, Lakefront just started the My Turn series. Employees work with the brewing staff to make a one-off beer of their choice. The first My Turn release is Baltic Porter, made by Dan, the brewery's tax and compliance and transportation manager. It's clear that Lakefront is dialed in to the world of craft beer and craft beer drinkers. But we wanted to know, in a big beer town like Milwaukee, synonymous with macro brew and large industrial brewing, is there a battle between big beer and craft beer?
I don't know, to me, it's I never really try to pay much attention to the bigger guys. You just have to look at what you've done. In the past, I used to have certain competition in town, and they were like going after you, and And the thing is when they left and then they came, or they came and left, your growth was the same. And I think it's all about what you're doing, not about them. I don't want to concentrate on them and all. You have to do what you do, and you do it your best. And from that point on, you just grow.
I think the breweries that are here are going to continue to grow. But I also think that if somebody came in and really wanted to start a new craft brewery in town, they probably could do it. I think there's a lot of beer drinkers here. I mean, obviously, Milwaukee's got a beer culture that goes back over 100 years. People are getting more and more educated about craft beer products that are out there.
I think it's important, too, for Milwaukee to have a very solid craft brewery. And you know, I like to think in the next couple of years we'd probably get up around 40 or 50,000 barrels and growing around there, and we can, you know, be more professional and get an anchor brewery in this town.
Whether or not you've ever been to the Once and Future Beer City, USA, and taken this epic tour, if you're a home brewer, Lakefront's generosity and open source attitude to their recipes mean you can take part in their history. Their ongoing and delicious history. For Chip, for Jake, I'm your host, Michael Dawson. All for Brew, Brew for all. See you next time, citizens.